They used to play outside, and the money they earned was barely enough for lunch at McDonald's. Today, tickets for their concerts are sold out in a matter of hours. They used to rehearse in a cramped garage, playing the cheapest instruments, but it'll only take a few years and they'll be performing on the same stage with the Rolling Stones. They started their journey as teenagers, but the unchildlike ambitions of these four talents made them famous on all continents. You are on the Enco Stories channel, and today we'll tell you the full story of four phenomenal Italians who created the Maneskin band. Why wasn't their frontman initially wanted to be included in the band's staff? Why is everyone so interested in their sexual identity? And how did they manage to break the curse of Eurovision? We'll talk about this and much more in today's video, so let's not beat around the bush and let's get started. Today, the phrase Italian rock band instantly generates associations with this particular band. Despite the fact that the career of Maneskin began relatively recently, their activity, a lack of fatigue, and outstanding performance quickly elevated them to the top league of modern music. But before talking about their common path, it's worth remembering how they found each other. So who are they, and where did they even come from? Victoria De Angelis, bass guitarist and one of the founders of the future band, was born on April 28, 2000 in Rome. Maternally, she has Danish roots, so she's fluent in Italian and Danish. As a child, she had a nanny, a native of Peru, who introduced the girl to such a musical style as reggaeton, and the desire to learn to play a musical instrument arose while watching an old Danish movie. Then Victoria heard an incredible guitar part and immediately asked her parents to give her a guitar tutorial. From early childhood, Victoria demonstrated a rebellious nature, resented any stereotypes or labels. At the age of 6, she had a real aversion to everything girlish. She skated, cut her hair short, and dressed like a boy. According to her, she did not wear skirts, not because she did not like them, but because she always wanted to be different from others. When the girl was only 15, her mother Jeanette got cancer and went to Denmark for treatment. Victoria flew with her, and when her mother's condition worsened, the girl stayed at her bedside until the last day. The stress of losing the closest person affected her mental health. Victoria suffered from terrible dreams and panic attacks, which forced her to miss a whole year of study. The only therapy that really helped was music. She studied at the Gianniculo High School in the center of Rome, and then moved to the John F. Kennedy Lyceum, where she chose a scientific direction. At the same time, Victoria attended music school, but classical guitar was not easy for her, so the teacher suggested that she try to play bass guitar. Since the age of 11, Victoria has been playing only on it. Her first idol was Avril Lavigne, but she also mentioned that Nick O'Malley of Arctic Monkeys and Kim Gordon, bassist of Sonic Youth, had the greatest influence on her. During this period, when Victoria was already in love with the bass guitar, at school she met and became friends with guitarist Thomas Raggi, the second member of the future band. Thomas Raggi was born on January 18, 2001 in Rome. Like Victoria, from an early age he was interested in music, studied, and played classics. At the time of their acquaintance with Victoria, Thomas already knew how to play acoustic guitar, but later switched to an electric one. His passion for music was passed on to him from his father when he was only 12 years old. He was already playing in a band created together with other children from a music school. His idols were, and still are, Led Zeppelin, and especially Jimmy Page, Jack Frusciante of the Red Hot Chili Peppers, Eric Clapton, and of course, Jimi Hendrix. Already in 2015, Victoria and Thomas began to think about the fact that music for them was not just entertainment, and something had to be done about it. The first ambitions appeared and the search for a drummer and vocalist began. At the moment when Victoria had already mastered the bass guitar, she met another future member of the band named Damiano David. Damiano was born on January 8, 1999 in Rome. His parents were flight attendants, which was why he and his brother traveled a lot as kids. This greatly expanded his cultural horizon and made him open to everything new, unusual, and sometimes even crazy. This is often seen in those moments when Damiano comes on stage. In an interview, he said that he was most impressed by a trip with his family to Tanzania, where he communicated a lot with the indigenous population, the ancient Maasai people. This happened shortly before the start of his musical career, so he believes that this is what prompted him to seriously engage in creativity. A career as a musician is the best fit for someone who wants to travel the world and get to know different cultures. I grew up traveling the world with my parents because they often took me and my brother with them. In this way, our parents opened up new countries and cultures to us. We never stayed in hotels or resort towns, but tried to live by the traditions of the places that the indigenous population opened up to us. For a long time, Damiano was semi-professionally engaged in basketball. He even played in an amateur Roman club. His height of 6 feet and athletic physique helped him a lot in sports, but he also had other ambitions. In parallel with sports, Damiano studied at a linguistic high school, but neither basketball nor linguistics looked like the business of life for him. Therefore, when he turned 16, he dropped out of school to focus on a musical career in the newly formed band by Victoria De Angelis. Actually, he was one of the initiators of the creation of this band, and a few years before that, he had proposed to Victoria to unite. The fact was that he wanted to sing much more than to sit at his textbooks. Perhaps someone will be surprised, but he did not manage to get into the band the first time. This new, as yet unnamed band, created by Victoria and Thomas, focused on metal and wanted to make only it. Damiano also argued that the only way to express themselves and be heard in the modern world is to make pop music. These disputes led to a week-long breaking off communion, but in all of Rome, there was not a single vocalist who would suit them better than Damiano.
It's our singer, frontman, sexy Damiano.
It's the four of us.
Thomas and Victoria auditioned several dozen applicants for the role of frontman, but none came up, and it was decided to turn to Damiano again. This time, he didn't argue anymore. He agreed with the concept of the rock band, but he also had his own ideas. He radically changed his style and now had his own vision of how to behave on stage. As a result, it is his performances, behavior, and voice that will become the most recognizable feature of Maneskin. The last link was missing. They needed a drummer. He was found again by Victoria when she advertised on Facebook. Ethan Torchio responded to it very quickly.
Okay, basically we found Ethan on Facebook, so we never saw him, and he didn't have any profile picture or anything.
He was born on October 8th, 2000 in the village of Monte San Giovanni Campagna near Rome. His father was a director, and his mother was so fond of the American actor Ethan Hawke that she named her son after him. Ethan has 8 siblings from 3 different mothers. Almost all of his childhood was spent between the shoots his father worked on. His father gave him a drum kit and paid for music lessons to give his son something to do. Already at the age of 5, the boy began to learn to play the drums and quickly realized that this was his vocation. A quiet and thoughtful boy with a foreign name became the last but most important detail in this puzzle, which will soon be called Måneskin. Any beginner group dreams of breaking through higher. But how do you do this when your biggest achievement is performing on the street, during which you only earned a few euros? Fortunately, in those days, there was one good option that suited them best. It was a music competition for teenagers called Pulse. Its founder, Matteo Caffarelli, was a man who organized various musical events in Rome and took into account what others often forgot. The main thing for him is to give school children the opportunity to perform on a real, professional stage with good sound for the first time. He understood how important this was because only performing in front of a live audience can show whether you have the X factor or not. The scheme of the competition was simple, but effective. The organizers found 24 bands that performed on different nights in front of judges from the music industry. The worst ones were gradually eliminated and the most worthy ones went to the next round. The idea was to give young bands the opportunity to perform in front of a live audience of about 100 or 200 people. For the vast majority of musicians, these performances were the first in their lives. In fact, as well as for Maneskin. Of course, except for performing on the street, in garages, and at parties with friends. Caffarelli managed to find sponsors, including music magazines, small record companies, and independent Roman music labels. Sometimes the giants of the industry also visited the performances. For example, a frequent guest at Pulse was David Dose, artistic director of Spaghetti Unplugged, Rome's most important musical event for the independent scene. In other words, there were several reasons to go to the competition at once. First, it was an opportunity to perform on a large professional stage, test the band for teamwork, and ability to stay on stage. Secondly, it was a good opportunity to meet the producers there, find the first listeners, and get a professional response to the work. Moreover, there were also enough music journalists at this event. In order to apply to the contest, it was necessary to come up with a name for the new band at least. It was created by Victoria, who was simply asked by other participants to remember some beautiful Danish words. Not knowing exactly what they were looking for, Victoria just started speaking Danish words aloud until the guys stopped her. The word on which Victoria was asked to stop was Måneskin, which translated meant moonlight. And although it's not directly related to the band, it sounds and is remembered, which will be confirmed by the first performances. It should be understood that in 2016, Måneskin was a teenage band, where everyone was roughly 16 to 17 years old. Damiano was the oldest. Back then, they didn't even have their own Facebook page. They had only 3 songs and like a dozen covers of the Black Eyed Peas, Led Zeppelin, and others in their repertoire. They were literally kids. They had no performing experience other than street sets, and they were just starting to play together, so the prospects for any, even the slightest success, seemed illusory. At that time, Caffarelli went to Roman schools promoting his competition with homemade advertising posters, and one day met Ethan. The drummer was interested in this competition, and at first he even agreed to come there with his band, which had just been formed, but after a few hours, Ethan realized how much responsibility it was, and tried to refuse. In the evening, Ethan called me and said that the band was not ready. They had never played together on stage before. He was afraid that they would look like fools, constantly repeating that they were not ready and that they had just come together. Fortunately, Caffarelli managed to convince Ethan and they went to the contest. Thus, the band took part in the quarter-final evening for the first time in April 2016 and received not only their first experience, but also their first victory. Subsequently, they appeared in the final where they also won. Fabrizio Galassi, a journalist for Roman music newspapers, the owner of a recording studio, and an expert in music marketing, was represented on the jury of the semi-final. Galassi followed everything that was happening on the music scene of his city, so he tried not to miss such events. In his article about Måneskin's performance, he will write that when they took the stage, he may have seen the future of Italian music. This is not only the first professional article about their work, but also a true prophecy that has come true. Pole's competition is far from Coachella, so the halls were always half empty. Mostly, their friends and acquaintances came to support the musicians. Galassi recalls that the hall was also half full that day, but the less time left before Maneskin's performance, the more people came in. When the band finally took the stage, the hall was full of people. Of course, most of them were classmates and other school children, but for a new, just aspiring band, even this was phenomenally exciting. Damiano was already the Damiano he is now, only with fewer tattoos, less makeup, and a different hairstyle. But even then, he had the charisma of a frontman and such self-confidence that others did not have. According to Galassi and other judges, Damiano was the center of attention because he acted as if he was standing on stage for the 100th time. He was mature, passionate, felt free and confident, which cannot be said about the other participants. They also devoted themselves to music, but it was still obvious that they were beginners who still had room to grow. From a stylistic point of view, it wasn't Maneskin's best concert, but it was clear that their teamwork was just a matter of time. However, they had to work hard to reach at least Damiano's basic level. They were sincere, energetic, and often this offset the difference between them and other bands, which sometimes were technically much better than Maneskin. But they were fresh, and they knew what they were doing. They played a simple and understandable musical genre, but they did it with a great passion that other bands did not have, and that's what set them apart from the others from the very beginning. They didn't come up with anything, but they understood how to reach the hearts and souls of teenagers who were mesmerized by their powerful sound. This is the factor that will prove to be fundamental and decisive in their careers. By the way, the experience of performing on the streets turned out to be very valuable for their further development. Quote, "On the street, we developed this instinct to know what's happening around you and how to keep the focus and to see when the atmosphere is kind of low," Damiano recalls. Quote, "You actually see the amount of people in front of you growing and growing, and then if you fuck up something, half of the people go away and you have to start over." So we still have this mentality of building up constantly during the show, and then finding a point where you're high enough to keep it stable till the last song. Galassi also wrote one important thing in his article. Perhaps it was the best advice for the young group. They needed to stay together, no matter what. Galassi wrote that as soon as the great producers hear Damiano's voice and see him on stage, they will do everything to separate the singer from the rest of the band. Even then, he looked like a formed solo artist who was just being backed up on by his friends. Galassi wrote, "They played very well, but not enough to compete on the big stage. They need to play 1,000 hours a week, take lessons from professional teachers, and find their own style as soon as possible." Moreover, Galassi became so imbued with the band that he even made them a list of urgent tasks that they had to follow in order to have a better chance of success. These were simple rules, but as we can see, they played a positive role. For example, add more electronic elements to your music, devote more time to rehearsals, write 5 songs in a month, and print your own merch to sell it at concerts. He also recommended them to become more interested in the music industry, study its world history in order to have specific guidelines and at least approximate goals. The most interesting thing about this is that these words were written in 2016 in a small blog about unknown teenagers. Today, everyone knows about Maneskin, but it was Fabrizio Galassi who was the first to see their potential and gave the first correct advice. They brought dancers with them to the final of Pulse, which was an unusual and unpopular decision. Maneskin did not just want to perform, even then they aspired to do a show. Of course, it was still far from the scale of Eurovision, but the start was made. The first prize they won was an inexpensive electric guitar. Then there was a mini tour, as well as recording a song at a professional recording studio and participating in a festival in the city of Faenza. It was supposed to be their first concert outside Rome. This was important because not only independent record labels gathered there, but also all the winners of various competitions and festivals held throughout Italy. You should not imagine that it was a sensation. Often these performances gathered no more than 100 people in the hall. From that moment on, the band started performing wherever there was such an opportunity, but they still preferred the street. They were often found on the Mons Hill or on the Via del Corso in the very center of Rome, where thousands of tourists pass every day. Apparently, many of them remembered those 4 teenagers who later turned into superstars. For example, in this video, they performed the song Chosen, which will lead them to the X Factor, and then to glory. The first person who tried to make a deal with the young band was the same Matteo Caffarelli who organized Pulse. He invited Maneskin to his home, offered them their first contract for several performances in major Italian cities. And although all the band members were full of enthusiasm, they decided not to rush and took a break to think about the offer. The next day, one of the parents of someone from the band called Matteo, but Caffarelli could not convince him. According to his own words, back then he was almost nobody, couldn't give anything to the band, just wanted to help them in the beginning. And although it was not possible to sign a contract at that time, the history of the band was just beginning. A much grander success awaited them, which was only a few months away. Inspired by the victory at Pulse, the band decided to participate in the selection for the 11th season of the show X Factor. They took the song Chosen for the selection, and within a few seconds after the start, both the judges and the audience realized that they were really the chosen ones. The way Damiano moved on stage and the way he sang gave him away not as a teenager, as he really was, but as an experienced artist, which he was only destined to become. Other members of the band did not lag behind in their professionalism. Of course, after such a performance, they received 4 yeses, moved on, and the next week performed the song that finally defined their career. They sang Beggin, an old song that brought fame to Frankie Valli and his band, The Four Seasons. Maneskin's version destroys the pop canons with which the song succeeded at the time. As a result, they have an absolutely amazing rock composition that will soon reach the top of the Spotify World Chart, and several times in a row with a break in a year. From the first episodes of the talent show, it was obvious that Maneskin stood out significantly compared to the other participants. With the song Beggin, they won the second episode, gaining a whole third of the total votes. If on the stage of the Pulse contest, Maneskin already tried to go beyond their traditional performance and connect with dancers, then on the X Factor, they went even further. They hired a professional team that provided lights, special effects, makeup, hairstyles, their costumes, and sets. Every week, Maneskin and its team staged an unforgettable show for Italian viewers. If you look at their early performances or recordings from street concerts, you can see that Maneskin dressed in ordinary clothes. No makeup, high heels, and naked torsos. They were ordinary teenagers, but the participation in the X Factor changed everything. They needed a style that would captivate and make people talk about them. From that moment on, appearances become almost the primary element of their performances. There are velvet jackets, flared leather trousers, silk shirts, and a bohemian style. Even more attention is paid to accessories: rings, earrings, necklaces, and bracelets, and strange beads. They paid a lot of attention to detail because that's the difference between the good and the extraordinary. They got to the finals thanks to the songs You're Nobody Till Somebody Loves You by James Arthur, former winner of the British version of the X Factor, and Fais les Moves by Sofiane. They had to compete with Samuel Storm, Enrico Nighiotti, and Lorenzo Recitra. In the first round, the guys performed with James Arthur's Sang Prisoner with him, then they performed a selection of their best compositions, Beggin, Take Me Out and Somebody Told Me. When Nighiotti and Samuel dropped out, there was only one step left to victory, and the last step in the form of Lorenzo Recitra. In the finale, Maneskin put everything on Chosen, thus closing the circle because it was with this song that their journey on the X Factor began. That evening, the audience gave the first place to the rival of the band named Lorenzo. But it was obvious to everyone that the real winners, the real discovery of the 11th season of the X Factor, were Maneskin. The unexpected loss was a shock to the band. That week after week received such high marks that no one could even get close to them. With each performance, they raised the bar higher and higher. It seemed that victory was only a matter of time, but that evening, Lorenzo put all his strength into his performance and snatched victory from Maneskin. And although they didn't take first place, it's hard to say that they lost. Episode after episode, week after week, their journey was triumphant. Exploring American pop music and rock culture, they mixed styles according to their own recipe and secured fame for themselves. The X Factor project opened up Maneskin to the general public and gave them great opportunities for rapid growth. Of course, they'll soon take full advantage of them, although at first they even doubted whether they should have participated in the show at all. Indeed, we weren't even sure we wanted to go to the X Factor. This is due to the way television programs are perceived. People often think that this is all fake, that everything's scripted. In the end, we made the decision because it was the only way to share our music with a large audience. Do you think that they would have been able to break through and gain such popularity if not for the X Factor? Write in the comments. If you have any favorite artists who become famous thanks to such talent shows. Shortly after that, Maneskin signed their first real contract with Sony. And their first mini-album, Chosen, was released on December 8th. There were all the songs that Maneskin sang on the X Factor, as well as 2 new compositions. In addition to the first release, a real manager finally appeared in their team who began to promote them. She negotiated with TV channels and arranged for them to participate in television shows and perform at popular festivals and clubs. A very important event for the band was a trip to London where Maneskin not only improved their English, but also had the opportunity to look at other talented representatives of the music industry. It was an important experience. Every evening they went to 2 or 3 concerts of young rock bands and were amazed at how important the audience played at the concerts. Quote, "There's huge vitality and interest around music, as well as big rock culture, even among young people, something we lack in Italy to some extent, and which we would love to export." The members of the bands recalled, quote, "We had the opportunity to perform live in London, and the city was a huge inspiration for our new album. After returning to Italy, Maneskin began to perform a lot. Tickets even to huge halls sold out in a matter of hours. Everyone around began to get the impression that Maneskin was really some kind of new phenomenon in Italian music. On March 23rd, they released their first song written in Italian, Morirò da Re, which translates as "I'll Die Like a King." In fact, it was the first single from the upcoming album, which went platinum 3 times. The songwriting process was formed a long time ago when they were just starting out. Damiano wrote poems, showed them to others, and then the creation of the music itself began. Sometimes it happened the other way, and the music was originally created, but Damiano is such a productive author that he had a text for any tempo, style, or mood.
This is Trastevere.
No way.
This is the first writing of Trastevere. We're going to be very quick.
Due to the fact that Maneskin began to write in their native language, they became closer to Italian listeners. Now they were releasing more songs in their native language, and listeners could fully understand their lyrics. That month was really stressful. TV shows, radio interviews, participation in the summer festival, as well as a performance at the Wind Music Awards, where the band was awarded 2 prizes, a platinum disc for the album Chosen, and a platinum single for the song of the same name. On September 6th, Maneskin opened the Imagine Dragons concert in Milan. It was a fantastic experience for such young people, but there will be even more of this in the future. Shortly before the release of their debut album, they became guests of the first live broadcast of the X Factor, and the very next day their album, Il Baio della Vita, was released. The tour in support of it covered the whole of Europe. The demand was so great that they constantly had to add more and more new venues until 2019. In total, Måneskin played more than 70 concerts on that tour, which were attended by almost 150,000 spectators. The debut album consists of 12 songs, half of which are written and sung in Italian. It revealed the band and introduced them to a wider audience. All the songs on the album, except one, are written by Damiano. They continued to make rock, mixing it with both pop and funk, but also showed that they could write melancholic ballads like Torna a casa, Come Back Home, and Le parole lontane, Distant Words. It's also obvious that they wanted to make a concept album with several characters wandering from song to song. The character was Marlena, a fictional muse, a woman who embodies beauty, freedom of choice, and style. The other hero of the record was a man who wants to be with Marlena until the very end, no matter what. According to Damiano, she's also the personification of the fear of not being able to be yourself. A man is security, self-belief, like a father or an older brother, and he puts this woman in an objectively uncomfortable situation in order to bring her to a better version of herself. Not to change her, but to make her accept herself. The title of the album fully reflects his idea, since Il Baio della Vita translates as the dance of life. Dance is a celebration of youth, a celebration of life and freedom. To reinforce this idea, Damiano tattooed this phrase on his chest. As for the music, Maneskin combines different styles with its own sound. According to Thomas, the guitarist, they intentionally introduced electronics and expanded their sound with new instruments. For the first single, a song was chosen that shows the side of their creativity that they did not show on the X Factor. In order to introduce listeners to Damiano, Victoria, Thomas, and Ethan, a documentary film, This Is Måneskin, was shot. It shows not only how these four work in the studio, but also who they are, what they dream about, what they hope for. The film was supposed to show that you can achieve a lot with talent, determination, hard work, and dedication. Maneskin entered the new decade on high notes, but with the aim of rising even higher. At that time, these plans were hindered by the COVID epidemic, so Maneskin returned to London, where they began recording new material. The first single was a slow, melancholic ballad. It told not so much about them, but about the whole generation of which Maneskin is a part. 20 anni, which translates to 20 years, was written by Damiano. His mature alter ego gives advice that David, quote, would like to hear from someone older now, when he is 20 years old. They relate to worries and disappointments associated with a sense of worthlessness, mistakes, uncertainty of the future. Maneskin urges not to think in black and white because, quote, you will be someone if you remain different from others. Fabrizio Ferragusso became the producer of the track. Maneskin changed their appearance, but not the sound. They now wear 70s-style clothes and are inspired by bands like Fleetwood Mac, Radiohead, and Nirvana. The advertising campaign for the album's release was also powerful. One of the masters of visual advertising, Oliviero Toscani, helped them. The photographer depicted them almost naked, and the pictures taken at Milan Central Station caused not only great excitement, but also great interest. Some of the photos were even deleted by Instagram because of Victoria DeAngelis' bare breasts. Meanwhile, the song 20 anni conquered the charts, was played on radio and television, and fell in love with more and more people. Humans are very afraid not to leave a single trace behind and often feel crushed by the hopes that adults place on them. 20 years has become a kind of anthem for a new generation caught between an environmental disaster and a pandemic. The band will continue this theme with a new song, which they presented at the 71st Sanremo Music Festival, an annual huge event in the world of music. The song is called Zitti e buoni, that is, quiet and well-behaved, and is again dedicated to people of their generation who angrily rebel against the world. It became clear that Maneskin was not just another band that came out of the talent show. It is really a new voice of a generation that marks epochal changes in the entire industry. This makes Maneskin different from everyone who was on stage that night, and it led them to win the festival. A few weeks later, on March 19th, the band's second album, Ti Tiro Diare Volume 1, was released. It contained 8 songs, and its title hinted at an imminent sequel. The peculiarity of the album was that it was recorded live, without adding effects or correction, and this perfectly conveys the feeling of a live concert. They wrote the album together from the first word to the last, trying to give all the energy in the studio, which they absorbed night after night during a long concert tour. Due to constant work, they had to work on the album between concerts. They made a record in Acquapendente, a small village near the city of Lazio. There, Måneskin met to take a break from concerts and try to restore the analog atmosphere that was characteristic of the music of the 1970s. That is, the music they were inspired by and grew up on. The highlight of the album was a song that instantly turned into a hit and conquered all social networks. The victory at the Sanremo Festival also earned them the right to participate in the Eurovision Song Contest in Rotterdam. Due to the fact that last year's competition was cancelled due to COVID, 39 artists were supposed to take part in it at once that year. Eurovision is a special contest, and there is its own curse. It claims that its winners are not remembered for long, and other participants are hardly remembered at all. Among the world-famous winners, we can only mention Celine Dion and the ABBA band. But Måneskin managed to avoid this curse, as their participation only increased their fame. Quote, "The reason that this happens to many artists is because they go on Eurovision having just the one song that they perform and don't really have a much larger vision about what they want to do." Victoria said, quote, "If people liked our exhibition there, then they would be able to dig deeper into who we are. So that's what happened. So if they think that people just get forgotten after a couple of weeks, it's just because they don't have enough material for people to go on being interested in them." Maneskin had to make concessions and remove a few obscene words in the lyrics of the song Zidi Ibioni to participate in the contest. There was no intrigue. All the time, Maneskin were leaders according to bookmakers' forecasts, and the support of the audience from different countries allowed them to confidently beat the competition. So on May 22, 2021, Maneskin brought to Italy a title that it hasn't had since 1964, when the very young Gigliola Cinquetti won Eurovision with her hit Non ho eta. Interestingly, Måneskin's Eurovision victory seems to inspire the whole of Italy to win. That year, the Italians won everything they could, from gold medals at the Olympic Games in Tokyo to the European Cup of American Football in Sweden. Måneskin won the Rotterdam Ahoy and won with tears in their eyes. One can imagine their state of mind. Thomas, for example, burst into tears like a child. Ethan couldn't even walk from emotion and then almost strangled Victoria with hugs. Before winning the Eurovision Song Contest, Måneskin were quite famous in Italy, but the performance in Rotterdam opened them up to the rest of Europe. Their performance was watched by 180 million viewers worldwide, and the song immediately hit the top 10 in the Spotify World's Top chart. In addition, their victory highlighted all the other songs which also instantly hit the top of the world charts. The track Beggin and I Wanna Be Your Slave quickly became popular in TikTok, although the band was not even registered there. After the victory, Damiano posted a photo with the long-awaited trophy and wrote that he still cannot comprehend what happened. The last few days had been hard, lots of things to deal with, and I just realized that I didn't take some time to understand what is really happening. So take a breath. You just did it, little boy. Their appearance during the performance in the final deserves special attention. Realizing that the attention of the whole world would be focused on them, Måneskin and its team created unique outfits for one evening. If the victory in the Sanremo Music Festival gave them the right to participate in Eurovision, then this triumph provided them with a long tour throughout the countries participating in the competition. It's been great. Victoria shared her impressions. Quote, "It's like a dream come true. It's something we've wanted for many years, and to see it happen in such a short amount of time is amazing. It's like we can't decide whether it's real or not. It's sometimes difficult to tell what's really going on." The first places in the charts, the trends of YouTube and TikTok, only contributed to the growth of their popularity and the ticket sales speed. But the real blessing, and so to speak, an invitation to the world of big music, were compliments from rock music icon Iggy Pop. He contacted the managers and expressed a desire to sing their song I Wanna Be Your Slave with Maneskin. At that time, Iggy Pop was already 74 years old, so his words that, quote, "Maneskin changed him with energy that he had not experienced for a long time," were especially valuable. I'm the devil, he's searching for redemption, and I'm a lawyer. And while some people were wondering why a star of this magnitude had paid attention to Maneskin, it turned out that their level of fame had also increased so well. In 2021, Maneskin became the most popular rock band in the world, gaining 51 million listeners on all platforms. After the final conquest of Europe, the band went overseas. The USA is a real test for any artist, especially for rock musicians. Perhaps the fact is that the Americans invented rock. They were the first to form this culture, so Maneskin wanted not just to look at everything from the inside, but above all, they longed to become a part of it. The first show where they appeared was The Tonight Show starring Jimmy Fallon, which hosted all the biggest stars of the USA and the world. The most important part of this meeting was that an amazing statement was made at the end. Maneskin will open 2 Rolling Stones concerts in Las Vegas.
What was it like when you get that call from Mick Jagger and you're like, oh,
Whatever.
Happened.
Maybe we can do it.
Just another day.
Yes.
2 concerts at stadiums, 65 and 72,000 spectators. All tickets are sold out. It's a good start, isn't it? Try to imagine for a moment the American audience of the Rolling Stones who bought a ticket to the concert of the gods of rock, immortal idols, but very young Italians came on stage. What could have happened? They would have been booed, and perhaps they would have gone back to Europe. But it happened differently. Against the background of general skepticism, the audience was delighted with what they heard from an unknown band. Suddenly, they discovered that Italy is not only spaghetti, pizza, and mandolinos, but also freshness, energy, and electric guitars. In addition, their appearance also captivated the public. They were dressed in costumes imitating American flags. In Las Vegas, Maneskin proved that they were not just good musicians, but really deserved their place. The most important thing was compliments from Mick Jagger, who clearly did not regret his choice. In general, we can assume that their trip was more than a success. They opened for legends, went to several cult shows, and presented new songs. As a result of this expansion, I Want to Be Your Slave has received gold status in the USA, and the band had a sold-out at all concerts. The success was also evidenced by selfies with them which appeared on the Instagram accounts of Miley Cyrus, Drew Barrymore, and others. Finally, they were nominated for the American Music Awards for the track Beggin, where they came in classic costumes, which again surprised the audience. And even though they did not get the victory, the band became 100% part of the big musical world, where he entered through the front entrance on the red carpet.
I used to be, the shadows of my life was hanging over me.
Such a surge in popularity can confuse anyone, especially if you're only 20 years old. But it seems that Maneskin adequately accepted this challenge of fate. We're aware that it's tough and that you have to be mentally prepared and mentally strong, and not everybody's capable of living this kind of life, Damiano said in an interview at the time. But I would say that we are capable because we've prepared ourselves for 5 years. We've been friends since we were really young. We know each other very well. We know the best parts of us. We're able to help each other every time something feels like it's too heavy or too stressful or something. I feel like you have to be able to understand your limits and set boundaries when you need to rest and disappear for a little bit and focus on your personal life. 2021 was definitely a happy year for Måneskin. Thanks to their Eurovision victory, they became a top band in Europe, and after a trip to the USA, they were also loved in America. Their audience numbered millions of fans around the world, so it was not surprising that they were attracted to socially significant events more than once. For example, Måneskin represented Italy at Global Citizen Live in Paris. This is a musical event that has been in existence since 2021 and is intended to increase awareness about global poverty and climate change. Such stars as Queen, Elton John, Ed Sheeran, and many others performed with them in Paris. On the Paris stage, against the background of the impressive Eiffel Tower, Maneskin sang Wanna Be Your Slave, Bury a Friend, For Your Love, Beggin, and Hush and Quiet. And the mini-concert once again highlighted the remarkable strength of these people who used their popularity for noble purposes. During a performance in Budapest, where the government censors any civic activity, Damiano appeared on stage in black leather briefs and high heels, and in response to Russia's armed invasion of Ukraine, Maneskin canceled his planned tour to a terrorist country. In addition, the band joined the large-scale #StandUpForUkraine campaign, the main goal of which is to raise as much money as possible to help victims of the war. Ukrainians did not remain indifferent and sent them a touching video as a sign of gratitude. Maneskin openly and consistently opposes any discrimination, wherever it is. When they performed in Poland, where conservative politics reigned, Damiano kissed Thomas. This gesture was a response to President Andrzej Duda's thesis that the LGBT community is not Poles, but an ideological group.
We think that everyone should be allowed to do this without any fear. We think that everyone should be completely free to be whoever the fuck he wants. Thank you, Poland!
The orientation of the band members is one of the most favorite topics for journalists, since the participants support minorities, oppose discrimination, and quite openly demonstrate their sexuality. Journalists often speculate on this topic. And not only they do this, but with their first appearance on The X Factor, there are disputes about Damiano's sexual orientation on the net. In order to stop rumors, he officially declared that he is heterosexual and has been dating model and blogger Giorgia Saleri for 4 years. In 2023, they broke up, but soon, Damiano began dating another woman, which again upset all the fans of the tabloid press. As for Victoria, from the very beginning, she was constantly credited with a relationship with the frontman, but she always replied that she and Damiano were just friends. She doesn't like to discuss the details of her personal life, although she said that at the age of 18, she had an affair with a 34-year-old guy, and in an interview with an Italian newspaper, Victoria called herself bisexual. Other participants prefer not to disclose even such details, so we'll not build theories and just move on. Not all artists can convert fame into a political statement and fight discrimination. Some are afraid of losing the loyalty of the audience, so they just keep quiet, but not Maneskin. But they had a lot to lose. In 2021, they became the most popular Italian artists in the world with over 2 billion streams. Their success grew and culminated in another important award. They were nominated for the MTV European Music Awards in the nomination Best Rock Band. Thus, Maneskin challenged The Killers, Coldplay, Imagine Dragons, Foo Fighters, and won again. During its American period, Maneskin represented the song Mamma Mia, which became the first single from the new album Rush. This is a very iconic song which contains all the stereotypes about Italians. On January 20th, 2023, the album was released. The presentation was arranged by Spotify. It was not just a party, but a real wedding at the Brancaccio Palace in Rome. The band members solemnly swore eternal fidelity and love to each other and then actually got married. According to the musicians themselves, they wrote more than 50 songs, but only 17 were included in the album. In fact, it's quite a large number for modern records. Another feature is that most of the songs are in English, which also distinguishes the album from previous releases. The album was recorded in Los Angeles, where Maneskin met producer Max Martin. He's often called the king of pop hits because he wrote songs for the Backstreet Boys, Britney Spears, Taylor Swift, and others. In total, he participated in the writing of 23 songs that once topped the Billboard Hot 100. But despite the growing influence on the American audience, the band does not forget about its Italian roots. Some of the songs on the album are written in their native language. Quote, "It's still really important to show that aspect of our band," says Raggi. Quote, "And outside of Italy, it's something maybe new to people that means a lot for us." Damiano adds to this, quote, "We have to keep it and respect it because it's part of us. The core of what we do, of our fan base, of our culture, is still in Italy." Among the singles, one can also highlight the song Gasoline, which was written in support of Ukraine and Ukrainian fans of Maneskin. There is an appeal to the citizens of the terrorist country in the song. They are asked how can they sleep at night after so many murders. There's also an appeal to the dictator. How does he sleep at night soaking wet in a golden bed? And is it good for a tyrant to live with blood on the hands of defenseless people? Another song called Cool Kids has an interesting story. It was written immediately after winning the Eurovision Song Contest when Maneskin felt like the rulers of the world. The song sounds like it could never get on the radio, but maybe that was the point. This is a stylization of old British rock like Sex Pistols. Damiano also had to get drunk to record, although he does not drink alcohol at all. This was done for a more believable stylization because before, especially in Britain, punk rockers were rarely sober, if they were ever sober. Marry me in the countryside. According to the artists themselves, the album was a bit like Frankenstein. It was made up for completely different styles and themes. Unlike the first record, which Maneskin tried to make conceptual, this album included 4 sides of their work. Quote, "With this record, we try to experiment more and go in different directions," Victoria said. Quote, "Each one of us has their own personality and individual tastes, so we tried to really enhance that. Instead of going in one common spot, we went for one song completely in Damiano's direction, one in mine, and so the record has a lot of more variety." Before moving on to trying to explain the phenomenon of this band, we'd like to ask you to subscribe to the channel and click on the bell. We willingly tell the stories of our heroes, but it takes effort, time, and motivation. Your like and subscription inspires us to work. Thank you, and we continue. The phenomenon of Maneskin's popularity cannot be broken down into components in order to derive a formula for their success. What is decisive, ironically, often acutely social text, their appearance or their style. Would they be popular without their frontman or without a bass player? What would they look like without Ethan on drums or without Thomas with his crazy solos? No wonder at the very beginning of Galassi's career, he convinced them that they should never be separated. After all, only together they could take over the world. Perhaps one of the decisive factors is their friendship. They've known each other since elementary school and they all picked up an instrument at about the same time. Of course, everyone had their own dream in childhood, but they met when they almost instantly decided that music was a fundamental part of their lives. Their friendship is strong. They write songs together, spend most of their time together. It's difficult to imagine them apart from each other because of this, but at the same time, each of them is an individuality that is not lost against the background of others, but shines in its own way.
Hey, my name is Damiano, I think. I don't know what to say.
Maneskin are young, successful, and popular. Their fame quickly crossed the borders of Italy, spread across Europe, America, and Asia. But what's wrong with them? It cannot be said that they invented rock. This is at least not true. The style of their music had been around for at least 50 years, and the band is following in the footsteps of David Bowie, Led Zeppelin, the Sex Pistols. All this is true, of course, but at the same time, it is not entirely true. Maneskin's success stems from their ability to avoid any categories, limits, and labels. Everything they do sincerely, truthfully, and stylishly. Millions of young people around the world follow them and perceive them not only as their peers, but also as friends who stand on stage and talk about what they themselves would talk about. Despite the fact that their journey began not so long ago, during this time they have conquered more than one peak. Some artists have been coming to such popularity for years, decades, but most never came. We can confidently say that Maneskin is a story about rapid but not short-term popularity. Having succeeded once, they did not stop, but continued to conquer new countries and won the right to their own place in music. And this place is up there somewhere. The most interesting thing here is that their story is still far from over. By and large, it is just the beginning. But our video, unfortunately, is coming to an end. If you enjoyed it, we'll be grateful for your like and subscription. And if you're interested in other stories of musicians, you can also find them on our channel. You don't have to go far for them. Click on the video that appears on your screen and watch. We always try to delve into the details of biographies in order to tell these stories as honestly and objectively as possible. So thank you for watching it. It was Inco's Stories. We're saying goodbye to you for a while. See you soon.